McNaughton Show. My name is Ian McNaughton. Thank you for joining us today. Today we're going to be discussing the 2023 Rugby World Cup Draw that happened early this morning. It's currently about 1:45 here in Vancouver. It's pouring rain outside. I got to cover the Rugby World Cup Draw this morning. I got the media access. It happened at 3 a.m. It started at 3 a.m. My time this morning, which was way too early. And then they did a whole bunch of interviews. They did the draws. I went to bed at 5 o'clock. I just couldn't stay up any longer. I saw something on Reddit where a person was saying, now I figured out why the Rugby World Cup draw takes place 3 years out is because it takes 3 years to actually complete, which is entirely true. I got to see the whole draw, which I don't know how long it took, but it was definitely very much a fraction of how long the 2 hours draw was that I saw. It took a long time. It took longer than it needed to be, but whatever. I watched it, I covered it, and now we know who some teams are going to be playing, who some participants in pools will be, and it's very exciting. I'm very excited, and we're here to break it down for you today, here on Ian McNaughton Show, part of Speak Your Piece. So let's get into what each pool looks like so far. So in Pool A, we have New Zealand, France, Italy, America's one, which I think is likely going to be the U.S., and Africa one, which I think is going to be Namibia. Pool B, we have South Africa, Ireland, Scotland. Asia Pacific one, which I put as Samoa ? It's either going to be Samoa or Tonga. And then Europe 2, which I have as either Spain, Romania, or Russia. That's who will be taking up the Europe 2 spot. Finally, Pool C, Wales, Australia, Fiji, Europe 1, which should be Georgia, and the final qualifier winner, which I put as Canada ? And then last but not least, England, Japan, Argentina, Oceania 1, which probably Tonga, and then America's 2, I have as Uruguay with a question mark, all participating in Pool D. So let's start from Pool A and then work our way through. So we have, again, New Zealand, France, Italy, America's 1, Africa 1. America's one I have as the U.S. I'm just saying for all intents and purposes, it's the U.S. With that being because the Americans are the second best team in the Americas, in North America, South America, behind Argentina. So the top American team that isn't Argentina, I would say right now, are the Americans. Africa one I have as Namibia. It's been Namibia for a while. They're the best team in Africa, behind South Africa, which is interesting considering Namibia have never won a World Cup match in their history. And they had a good chance to do so against Canada in the 2019 Rugby World Cup match, but that got canceled due to Typhoon Hagibis. So instead, they are likely going to be matching up in Pool A of the 2023 Rugby World Cup with New Zealand, France, and Italy. New Zealand has never lost a pool stage match ever in the history of the Rugby World Cup. This will be the 10th edition coming up in 2023. You know, it's the first time since 2011 that France will play New Zealand in a pool. That should be a really competitive match, France and New Zealand. I don't know if it's going to be the first match of the tournament. It has the possibility to be that. However, France should be playing New Zealand. France should be playing Italy. All of those games should be close. I don't know if France beats New Zealand. France should beat Italy. France should beat the U.S. and Namibia. If we're making way too early picks, New Zealand should be the top of this group. Italy has the outside shot of getting the second place, that quarterfinal spot, but really, this is New Zealand and France's pool to lose. They're the two best teams in this pool. France is the host, so they'll have extra motivation to perform. So that's my reasoning for how I think this pool is going to turn out. If Namibia is Africa 1, it would be the third tourney in a row in a pool with New Zealand. They just cannot catch a break in avoiding New Zealand, it seems like recently. Also a revenge game for Italy, I would say, because they missed out because of Typhoon Hagibis in 2019. They missed out their match against New Zealand, which I was supposed to cover in Toyota. Didn't happen. So there's a bit of revenge there, I would say. Some extra motivation for Italy. I don't know that they'll beat New Zealand. I doubt it, but there's motivation. The matchup to watch in this pool has to be France and New Zealand. That's going to be the all decisive game for the top spot in the pool. The two best teams in this pool, two top 5 teams in the world. France is playing on an unreal level. New Zealand is always, in my mind, going to be the top team in the world. No offense to the Springboks, who are the number 1 ranked team in the world right now. A team to watch in this pool, I'm going to say you can make the argument for France. I just said Italy because Italy should be improving and between now and the start of the World Cup. I don't know that they beat France or New Zealand, but they should be getting better and improving, and they should definitely beat the U.S. and Namibia. They beat Namibia in the last World Cup in their pool stage match. So New Zealand should, beat Italy. France should beat Italy, but Italy should beat Namibia in the U.S. That's how I kind of see it. As a team to watch, just because they should be better, but they're not going to be a quarterfinal team. That's kind of where I see Italy. Let's move on to Pool B. You have South Africa, you have Ireland, you have Scotland, you have Asia Pacific 1, you have Europe 2. Asia Pacific 1, I just have as Samoa. Samoa will play Tonga, and one of them will get an automatic spot. I have that as Tonga just being Oceania 1. I think Tonga will beat Samoa in the playoff. I think they do a home and home type thing. So Oceania 1, I would say we go to Tonga, but that's Pool D. Samoa should win against whoever the other Asian team that they're going to play. I think it was Hong Kong in 2019 that competed in that position, and then they lost to Samoa, I want to say. I could be wrong. But I have Samoa winning against whoever the other Asian qualifying team would be, and then playing in Pool B. Not an easy task considering you have the reigning world champions. You have an Ireland team who looks really good, and you have a Scotland team who's playing down a little bit, but is still really competitive. Europe, too, is just going to be an absolute gruesome battle between Spain, Romania, and Russia trying to get that last spot. Spain and Romania both got disqualified from qualification because they both fielded ineligible players, allowing Russia to show up in 2019. I don't think that's going to happen again. I think Spain and Romania will be smarter this time. So that kind of leaves out Russia a little bit. But nevertheless, it's going to be a really gruesome battle for that final spot in the pool, and it has a very familiar, like a very familiar type feel as in the Group A of 2019 Rugby World Cup, where that was Japan, Ireland, Scotland, Samoa, and Russia, and this year it's looking like South Africa, Ireland, Scotland, and then Samoa, and not Russia, but another European team, and it's that kind of similar feel. Um, I I have South Africa winning the pool. They should win every one of these games. My matchup to watch in this group is Scotland versus Ireland, just because that's going to be the game that decides the second place spot in this pool and who goes to the quarterfinals and who misses out on the quarters. Ireland, South Africa is really going to be fascinating to watch. I'm going to love seeing that game, considering I think Ireland's closer to South Africa than they are to Scotland in terms of how they're playing right now. It's just fantastic seeing the Irish playing as well as they are. So we'll see how that goes. My team to watch in this group is Scotland. I said, I think it was last week, where I was doing my kind of superlatives for how the autumn rugby season ended, and I said Scotland was the most likely to fire their coach just because Gregor Townsend's kind of I thought he was on the hot seat a little bit in terms of how the team has been performing, how he handled the Finn Russell situation, and instead he gets an extension that lasts him through the 2023 World Cup. So he's going to be coaching Scotland in this upcoming World Cup. I'm excited to see how that goes. I don't know that Scotland fares any better than they did in the 2019 Rugby World Cup. They should beat Samoa. They should beat whoever Europe 2 is. I don't know that they beat Ireland or South Africa, but we'll see. They're a team I'm definitely going to be watching between now and the 2023 Rugby World Cup. Pool C. It's almost essentially the Pool C of the 2019 or Pool D, excuse me. It's almost Pool C in 2023 is almost like Pool D in 2019, where you have Wales, Australia, Fiji, Europe 1, which will likely be Georgia, and a qualifier winner, which I have Canada and a question mark. This is the most wide open pool of the tournament. It's the third straight tournament where we'll see Wales, Australia, and Fiji participating in the same pool. So that's cool. You know, Australia should win this pool. Second place will be really competitive between Wales, Fiji, and Georgia. Wales has to. There's an opportunity for Wales to win this pool. They just have to play up to what they've been playing the last few months, which has been not good, not enough to be a competitive team internationally. So Wales, again, there's a world in which they can win this pool. They just need to play better. I don't know if that's with Wade Pivac. I don't know if it isn't. So we'll see how that goes. Europe 1, again, I have Georgia. Georgia is the best European team that hasn't, in the world rankings, that hasn't qualified for the World Cup yet. They had a really tough showing with a lack of preparation and getting players ready, I guess, for the Autumn Nations, where they lost every one of their games, and it wasn't really close, with the exception of possibly the Wales game, you can argue. But they could give a team a headache. They could give Fiji or Wales a headache here. That wouldn't be a complete surprise. And I'm predicting Canada wins the final qualifier. I think Canada will kind of go down the same route that it did for the 2019 Rugby World Cup as they will in the 2023 World Cup, where they probably won't be the second best team in the Americas. Right now, that's Uruguay, if you look at the rankings. This whole draw, by the way, was done with what the rankings looked like on Jan 1 and not what the rankings are right now, which is an interesting caveat. That being said, if I was Canada, I would rather be in Pool C than Pool D. I think Pool C is an easier, pool to be in if you want to go compete in the quarterfinals. I don't see Canada outperforming Wales, Fiji, Georgia, and definitely not Australia. But there's a world in which Canada can get into, Pool C and at least maybe be interesting and have a few interesting games. My matchup to watch in this pool, I have Fiji versus Wales. The interesting thing with Fiji is that Fiji had a really good start to the 2019 Rugby World Cup. And by good start, they had like a good first half, and that they had a good 50 minutes, and that was the highlight, I think, of their tournament. They beat Georgia, but that was about the highlight of their tournament, was how well they played Australia in the first 50 minutes of that game, and then they fell apart and they lost, and Australia just battered them in the second half of that. Fiji has the opportunity to make the quarterfinals. Assuming Wales is still at the same level now that they are in 3 years from now, that they're the same team that they are now. Wales should beat Georgia. Fiji should beat Wales. Fiji should beat Georgia, and Fiji should beat Canada. Asking Fiji to beat Australia is a lot, but in the matchup to watch, it's Fiji versus Wales, just to see if Fiji can steal a second place spot in the pool. The team that I have to watch is Wales. Just because Wales has not been performing well, they need to perform much better, and they need to do so, in a few years. They have about 2 and a bit years to prepare and get ready so that they can compete against the likes of Australia and Fiji and Georgia. They need to. They have to. You don't want to be that team that's just surviving every game. And then finally, we got Pool D: England, Japan, Argentina, Oceania 1, and Americas 2. I have Tonga right now with a question mark as my Oceania 1, and I have Uruguay with a question mark as my Americas 2. Um, God, England should win the pool. England has been playing at an unreal level going back to last year, going back to the 2019 Rugby World Cup. They should win this. Argentina, though, they had a really good performance at this year's Tri Nations, including beating New Zealand. And it, again, I say this with Argentina all the time. They're a very hot and cold team. They are probably going to go through a cold stretch between now and the start of the Rugby World Cup in 2023. It depends on how they're going heading into how they're looking heading into. If they have momentum, if they don't have momentum, that'll be a key in this pool. And Japan hasn't played in 2020. They had quite a few matchups scheduled, and due to the coronavirus, it didn't work out. They had to cancel all of them. I think they still have a busy 2021 ahead of them. I believe, I could be wrong, but they play Scotland. They play the British Irish Lions. They probably, if the Autumn Nations comes back, they will perform in that as well. They're going to be busy in 2021. This is a really fascinating group for them in that they should beat Argentina. I think Japan can beat Argentina. I don't know about England, but they can beat Argentina. Oceania 1, Tonga. They played Argentina in 2019 in Pool C, I think it was, and it wasn't really that close. I don't know about where Tonga fits in with this. America's 2, likely Uruguay. It's likely either Uruguay or Canada. And if Canada's in Pool D, they're not even. They might be competitive against Tonga. They're not going to win any other matchup. Kind of the same with Uruguay. Uruguay had a nice upset victory over Fiji in the last World Cup. I don't see Uruguay defeating any of these teams. They might beat Tonga, but I don't see them beating Argentina. I don't see them beating Japan. Certainly not England. My matchup to watch in this pool is Japan versus Argentina. Both of those teams feel like they can be a quarterfinal team. Japan really feels that way, especially with how well they performed in 2019 at home. They're building something here in Japan. They're building something. Hopefully it's competitive. Hopefully it's at least a top 10 team in the world. They're currently ranked 10th in the world. So Japan has got a lot going on with them. Argentina, again, they're very hot and cold. We'll see how that one goes. They can beat Japan. They could even beat England in an upset. Who knows? But Japan should be able to beat Argentina. That's going to be the decider in this group of who's going to go to the quarterfinals and who's going to go home. The team to watch in this pool is Japan. Again, see if they can carry any momentum over from 2019 into 2023. They should beat Tonga and Uruguay. It might not be pretty, but they should beat them, and they should beat Argentina. I don't see them beating England, but they should beat Argentina. I think it'll be really disappointing for Japan if they followed up their performance in 2019 with missing the quarterfinals in 2023. So technically right now there's 20 spots available. We already know who the 12 teams are that are participating, and we need 8 teams to round out the 20. I would say America's 1, Europe 1, Oceania 1, and probably America's 2 and Asia Pacific are all locked. I would say there's about 2 spots that are really wide open and anybody could win. I'm going to say it's Europe 2 and the final qualifier winner. So Europe 2, which again is in Pool B, that's going to be between Spain, Romania, and Russia. That's wide open. I don't know who is going to come out of there successful and winning whatever Rugby Europe Championship. I don't know who's going to win that. The final qualifier winner, so that should be Asia Pacific 2. So that should be again, Samoa and Tonga will play. The winner automatically qualifies for the World Cup. Then the loser of that, they're going to be playing Asia Pacific 2, and the loser of Samoa Tonga should beat whoever that team is. I'm going to say Hong Kong. So let's just say, for example, let's say that Tonga wins Oceania 1. So then it's Samoa versus the Asia Pacific 2, and let's say, for example, it's Hong Kong. So Samoa will play Hong Kong. I would say Samoa would win that, and then Hong Kong would go to the final qualifying tournament. The Europe 2 loser, so basically Europe 3 then goes to the final qualifier. The Americas 3 would go to the final qualifier, and I believe Africa 3. So I believe the final qualifier will look something along the lines of Canada, Hong Kong, let's say Romania or Russia, because they're lower on the rankings compared to Spain at the moment. And Africa 3, I think that's Kenya at the moment is the third best team in Africa. So your final qualifying tournament is looking like Canada, Hong Kong, Romania, Russia, and Kenya. Four of those teams, with Romania and Russia being the deciding team to make it. And I think Canada can beat all those teams. I think Canada is better than Hong Kong. They should be able to beat Romania and Russia, and they should be able to beat Kenya. So that's why that one is still a bit of a toss-up, but I would say it's not official. Nothing's confirmed. Kind of the same with Europe too, where we have to see if Spain, Romania, or Russia takes that spot. Overall, I think this is a really, really good Rugby World Cup draw. I think we'll see a lot of competitive matches, especially, the New Zealand, France, South Africa, Ireland, Wales, Australia again, England, Japan even, I would think would be fun. Japan, Argentina too. There's a lot of good matchups here, a lot of quality teams. I'm really excited for this. We're hoping to cover this in 3 years from now. Hopefully we'll go to France and we can be a part of this. It should be a great experience. We were in Japan last year. Hopefully the brand will be bigger so that we can promote more of this and we can grow in the rugby field. If you have any questions or you want questions answered, feel free to email them syppodcast@gmail.com. That's for the Speak Your Piece podcast as well. You can email any questions and we'll answer them on the pod, especially when it comes to the Rugby World Cup draw, because it can seem a bit confusing for people who are unaware or just don't know what's going on. Feel free to send your questions to syppodcast@gmail.com and we'll answer them for you there. Thank you very much for listening. Really appreciate your support. Please tell your friends. Be sure to like us and subscribe to us on YouTube. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or iTunes. Wherever you get your podcast, you'll find us there. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll talk to you again soon. Peace out.